Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Mendon Congregation, Unitarian Congregation of Mendon, Uxbridge. My name is Matthew Marion. I'm going to be starting off today with Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2.
Good morning and welcome as we gather today at the Unitarian Congregation of Mendon and Uxbridge. Today is a day that ordinarily Goss Hall would be filled with people preparing for the senior recognition banquet. This year there will not be a formal banquet, but there is a parade today, I understand. And it is a time that we may think for a moment of the seniors in this town who have served and made a difference in the lives of all of us by their good works and good thoughts. This will be the next to the last service that I will be leading here. I invite you to join me for the final service next Sunday, but it has been a real joy to be with you for 15 years, and I look forward to retirement. May we begin our time together with these words of William F. Schultz, former UUA president. Come into this place of peace and let its silence heal your spirit. Come into this place of memory and let its history warm your soul. Come into this place of prophecy and power and let its vision change your heart.
This will be Chopin's Minute Waltz.
It is our custom as we gather to kindle a flame in our midst, a flame long the symbol of the presence of that which is whole and holy, a flame the symbol of wisdom and of knowledge, and we kindle the flame in a chalice, a shared cup, as a symbol of the fact that each week we gather as a community. We gather as one people in search of truth, in search of wisdom, in search of that which makes our lives whole and holy. I invite those of you who wish to join in our affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. At this time in our service, we would usually invite those gathered to come forward if they wish to share a joy, a milestone, a sorrow, and light a candle. However, since we are gathered virtually today, we invite those of you who wish to submit a joy or sorrow either through the chat or email, and towards the end of the service, we will light candles and share our joys and our sorrows. This is the time that I often tell a story, but today I've decided to do something different. When I came into the church on Thursday, there was a letter from a resident of one of the nearby towns, chastising us for having a Black Lives Matter, but really for supporting the Black Lives Matter organization, which is truly violent, or at least advocates violence. She shared a story about a family that was humiliated while dining in a mall, and then the father being killed. I sent a response to her. Dear, I don't quote her name, I am sorry you are bothered by the Black Lives Matter banner. It is not a sign of support for blacklivesmatter.com, which most of us strongly oppose. The fact is that we live in a time when the percentage of black and brown people incarcerated, dying of COVID, living in poverty, unjustifiably killed by law enforcement, underemployed or unemployed, living with hunger is so much greater than for white people that we must take a stand. We live in a country where the president refuses to condemn white supremacists, and bringing up the Proud Boys, one of the most violent white supremacist groups, told them to stand back and stand by, which they took as an endorsement. You have not, nor will you, hear this congregation or its leaders advocating or approving violence. In fact, it was a minister of this very congregation who was largely responsible for the idea of nonviolent protest, which so greatly influenced the movement in the 1960s. In fact, he was also a minister in the Church of Hopedale. The case that you cite was horrible, nor should any cases like it ever happen. But it was done by, in your words, a hoodlum, a criminal who, if identified and caught, would be immediately arrested and tried. But what about Trayvon Martin? What about Tamir Rice? What about George Floyd? What about Breonna Taylor? Were their killers immediately arrested? Were all of them tried? Please help me. I dislike our banner's connection with groups that are violent as much as you do. What 3 or 4 words that could be put on a banner would speak as strongly as the words on our banner? UU churches for well over a decade have been putting up Black Lives Matter banners before the connection with radicals and haters. We are celebrating the 200th birthday of our building this year. A building probably built largely because our members and our ministers were preaching and teaching abolition of slavery. Will we be silent now? We never have, and I hope that we will not until all people are treated with respect and dignity. In faith, Reverend Ralph T. Clarke.
This next piece I'll be playing for you guys will be Liszt's Liebesstraum. Now, Liebesstraum translates to scenes of love. Now, this work would have been something that during the 19th century, Liszt and other contemporaries would have gotten together in a much more intimate setting to try to recreate the same kind of arias, singers, guitarists, and whatever have you that you have gotten during the time. So this would be Liebesstraum.
Let us pause for a moment. Let us hold in our hearts and minds those joys which we find. Let us hold in our hearts and our minds the beauty of this early fall season. The days which have been so unusually warm, and even as the weather cools, may we hold in our hearts and our minds the possibilities for the future, the possibilities that we will soon have treatments or good ways of avoiding the COVID infection. May we hold in our hearts the possibilities that we can make a difference, that we can call on our spirits and on all our hopes to make of this world the place that it can be, the place that it should be, a place that honors love above hate, a place which calls on us to be our best selves. Amen. My sermon today is entitled, "The Power of a Name." Ursula K. Guin, an author who wrote a good deal of fantasy, wrote one of my favorites, the Trilogy of Earthsea. It's a series of books following the life of a very great, perhaps the greatest wizard in the time and area in which he lived. He was commonly called Sparrowhawk, but as a child he was known as Dooney. And since he didn't particularly enjoy working in his father's blacksmith shop, he spent a good deal of time with his mother's sister, listening to her, watching her. She was, you see, a witch. And as he listened to her, he began to learn the true names of some common animals, some spells of summoning, and other types of spells. He found that if he used the true name of a rabbit, it would come right to him even if he was holding a knife in his hand. And that he could summon things other than animals. And so, as a small army invaded his country and came through destroying villages in their path, he called upon a fog that filled the air around the village, and these enemies went right through the town, unaware that they were walking within feet of the buildings. And then most of them were killed as they had gone beyond the town. It was the custom, as children grew near maturity, that they should be given their true names. And it happened that a great wizard was in the area and gave him his true name. But that name was not the name that he used or shared with any but his closest and most trusted friends, because that name had great power. It could be used to control or even destroy him. If he was seeking to be invisible by turning himself into a different animal or bird, speaking that name would return him to his usual form. It was a powerful, powerful thing, that true name. And so he did not use that regularly, but was called Sparrowhawk. And if you promise not to reveal it, I can tell you that his true name was Ged, G-E-D. But please don't spread it around, because knowing that name would allow you a great deal of control over him. And if he had transformed, you could return him to his form. Great power lies in knowing the true name. As a student in a school of wizardry, he spent a great deal of time training to learn the names of as many things, as many people as he could. One could not cast a spell that would control the whole ocean. But if one knew the name of a bay, one could destroy a storm that was in that bay. You could even control a great dragon if you had somehow been able to obtain its name. It's not the same today, but a name is a powerful thing. You see that today I'm wearing a name tag. When we have regular services, we invite everyone to wear a name tag. It allows us to communicate more deeply and more quickly with one another. I'm going to suggest to us today that we learn to find and use that power of a name. If you walk into the produce section of a supermarket and see a man with a name tag saying Dave, address him as Dave when you ask a question. Dave, I can't seem to find the kale. Do you know where it is? Now, he may very well say, why on earth would you want to find kale? But he might remember you the next time you came in and offer help. Even businesses use that power these days. If I have a question about my credit card and dial the help service number, I will almost certainly be greeted by, "Hello, Ralph. Now you know, and I know, that it was not a real person who answered that call, but a computer." It doesn't bother me much anymore, but I must admit that the first time it happened, it was when I called Verizon Fios, that they said, "Hello, Ralph." I made a call to the customer service department and said, frankly, I am offended by a machine calling me Ralph. It should at least call me Reverend Clarke when it answers. And after several calls and several long arguments, when I dialed Verizon, I was greeted by, "Hello, Reverend Clarke." I don't know exactly what they did. They changed the names, I suppose, in my record, and my first name became Reverend Clarke. But I've gotten used to it. There are so many businesses now who, if you do business regularly with them and have given them your phone number and name, will address you by your first name. By now, I suspect that you, like me, don't mind, and perhaps even enjoy being greeted with your name, even by a computer program. And I try to do it not only on the phone or in the supermarket, but as much as possible, the people that I meet, I address by their name. I enjoy lunch at the Il Forno restaurant in Littleton. And I often say, "Hi, George," even though he is not my favorite server, and I wish he were Jenna. If I go to Stephen Anthony's for breakfast, I usually say, "Hi, Matthias. How are you doing this morning?" Whether he is my server or not, almost every time I see him, he comes over and says hello. It's important that the person, whoever that may be, whoever the person is that you're talking to, is not, "Hey, you." The power of a first name, the power of a name is great. We ought all to try to learn the names of people around us, to use clues, whatever they are, to at least make our interactions more personal. We ought to learn a little bit about people that we interact with regularly. Little things do make such a difference. I've done a fair amount of traveling in a number of countries, and I always try, when I first get there, to find out what the way is to say thank you. I spent a wonderful couple weeks in Egypt back a number of years ago, and there was one server who was particularly good, particularly friendly. And so I asked our guide, "How do you say thank you in Arabic?" And she told me, "It's shukran." When I saw that employee, I said shukran when he brought me something. And several years later, I was on a cruise. All of the people that work on cruises are taught and required to be polite and helpful. But there was one young man who did something for me. I don't remember now what it was. It wasn't terribly important, but he was friendly and smiled. And I was quite sure from his appearance that he was Arabic. And so I said, "Shukran." He looked at me and said, "What did you say?" And I said, "Shukran." And he said, "That's the first time in this whole cruise that anyone has said that to me." And went on in Arabic. I said, No, I know one word." And he said, "That's enough." We've got to, in this age, in this time of division, we've got to learn to be with each other, to treat each other as though we all matter. Our UU principles tell us that the inherent worth and dignity of every person is important. We must find a way to know and to share the importance of every person we meet, whether it's our closest friend, whether it's the server at a restaurant, whether it's a supporter of a candidate that we don't share a support of. We must learn to seek to find some connection, some way that we can speak as though a name to every person to show that we respect, that we honor their being, their presence. This is the time to start. We don't all need to wear name tags on our shirts or our jackets. But we do need to look for the name tags of those we meet, whether they're verbal, whether they're written, whether they're just guessed. Some way of making contact, of showing that we are talking not to just, hey, you, but to John or Sylvia or Mary. Somehow, we must let the people around us know that we respect and care about them, even if we don't agree with them, even if we don't share much of our time with them, even if it's just a passing meeting. You and I and every person we meet has value and deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. I'd like to light a candle of hope for the recovery of our president, and a hope that his illness will convince his friends and supporters that masks do work, that masks are important. And a candle of joy for the families with friends that have recovered from COVID. A candle of joy for Kevin and Vicky's marriage. And from Ellen Gould, a candle for all people who are alone at home, wishing for companionship. And finally, a candle for all the members of our congregation whom we see less frequently than we wish. May they be healthy. May they find joy in their lives. May each of us be in contact with the others that we see less often than we would like, for that makes a difference in our lives and in theirs. As we reach the end of our service, as we extinguish the flame that we kindled at our gathering, may it burn on in our hearts and in our minds. May it call us always to be with those who surround us with those in need of companionship and comfort. May it burn on in our hearts, calling us to be our best selves, working for a better future for all. May it be a flame that burns in our hearts and calls on us to work diligently to reduce the spread of this horrible virus. May it burn on in our hearts, calling us to be our best selves, to be a part of the community that makes the difference with love. Amen.
Thank you, Ralph. I'm going to be closing off today with Chopin's Nocturne number 19. Now, this final nocturne was one of the very few pieces that were published after the composer died, about 35 years old. This work here, which is supposed to be as not meant as a passing, but as still as a joy and a celebration to new ideas. So here is Chopin's Nocturne number 19.